In this video, I'll be sharing my very first experience with Sonic the Hedgehog, way back in 1991. My Sonic fan origin story, if you will, and how I went from a kid who was largely indifferent to gaming to a Sonic and Sega mega fan. Despite it being 32 years ago at the time of recording this video, my memories of this game are so staggeringly vivid that I almost remember them as if they were yesterday. If it was a yesterday where I'd had 4 or 5 pints and it was adding a bit of a haze to the memories and a mild headache, that is. Anyway, I thought this would make for an interesting video, and also thought it would be cool to see if anyone else out there had similar first experiences with Sonic. So, whether you're a Sonic OG like me, or if your first experience was far more recent, or anything in between, be sure to let me know about it in the comments. With that said, let's get into it. My first ever video gaming experience was Super Mario Bros. On the Nintendo Entertainment System, in what must have been roughly 1990, I guess. I didn't own a NES, but my best pal did, and I would regularly go to his house, where we'd sink hours and hours into the game's 2-player mode. I remember being so immersed in it that I'd only be able to play standing up for some reason, and whenever I'd hit the jump button, I'd involuntarily jump in real life too. Odd behavior perhaps, but I was an odd kid, and I'd never played a game before, and I was very young. My friend and I never managed to beat the game and rescue the princess, but that didn't really matter to us. We were having the best time regardless of our repeated failures. In fact, I don't think our aim was ever to beat the game really. It was just see how far we can get and see if we can find any new secrets along the way. My friend had the 1988 version of Mario Bros. That had Duck Hunt on the same cartridge too. So unsurprisingly, that was my second ever gaming experience, blasting away at ducks with a light gun. And the tech truly blew my mind. What an awesome combo of games. I adored both of these. But bizarrely, as much as I liked the NES, and I really did enjoy it, nothing I'd experienced resonated with me enough for me to slap a Nintendo Entertainment System on my Christmas list that year. I don't know why, but as much fun as I had with these games, I didn't have any desire to own them. I was cool with playing them at my mate's house. Maybe it was a social thing for me. Who knows? Not too long after this, I did get some consoles, but these were hand-me-downs. My dad gave me his old Pong console, which I got about 5 minutes of use out of as kind of a quirky novelty. After you've been capping ducks with a big plastic gun, going back to sliding a couple of blocks around a screen just doesn't have the same appeal. Then I got given an Atari, I'm not sure which one, but it was from my grandparents' next-door neighbor's kid, as he'd upgraded to a NES. It had Centipede and Space Invaders and a bunch of other games. It was a really cool thing to give away. I sunk a lot of time into this machine, but none of the games or their blocky characters ever really resonated with me. As fun as they were, I could take it or leave it. But all that soon changed. I believe it was late June or early July of 1991 when I got invited to a friend's house. I didn't keep up with gaming news at the time, but from what I could gather, he was excited. He had a new console with a brand new game that I had to see apparently. It was a lovely summer's day. The sun was shining during my short journey to his house, and it seemed like a great day to be playing in the garden. But that idea was about to go straight out the window, as when I got to his house, I found him lurking in the shadows of the dining room. Curtains drawn, with a portable TV set up on the table alongside a brand new Sega Mega Drive. This was possibly the first time I'd ever seen one, outside of maybe a shop display or something. In any event, it was the first time I'd paid any real attention to one. Its slick black design and control pad, which looked like a big departure from anything I'd used previously, certainly intrigued me, but I think deep down I still just wanted to go outside. Wow, what an active kid I was. What went wrong? Then he switched it on. Sonic the Hedgehog for the Sega Mega Drive. Sega! Boomed a voice over the big blue logo. And then I saw him. The spiky, blue, confident, kind of pissed off looking creature wagging his finger at me on the most stunningly colourful and detailed title screen I had ever seen. The Sonic merch of the early 1990s, at least in the UK, all said The Hedgehog with attitude. And holy shit did this guy ooze attitude. And with the hit of the start button, we were off. The first time I saw Sonic the Hedgehog, I was a mere spectator. This was like a let's play from the caveman times. So my mate was playing, and he'd clearly had plenty of attempts at Green Hill already prior to my arrival. He clearly had the controls down pretty well. It was probably a good way to experience it for the first time. I so vividly remember my first viewing of Green Hill Zone. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was so vibrant and colourful, with the most detailed visuals I'd ever seen in a game. And it was so stupidly fast. Let me explain here. If you didn't grow up with the 2D games, you might look at classic Sonic today, particularly Sonic 1, and not understand what the hell doddering old farts like me are talking about when we say it was fast. But it truly blew me away back in the day. It wasn't just the run speed. I mean, Mario could run pretty fast. And it wasn't the momentum of rolling down hills or through tunnels. It was everything. It was the way Sonic would fly high into the air off ramps, or roll out of a loop-de-loop at an increased speed and get launched high into the sky off springs, with the screen frantically trying to keep up with the character. Now, I'm based in the UK, so we had the 50Hz bordered PAL version of the game, meaning it was slower than it was in the US and Japan. But to me, it was still fast AF. My Mega Drive passed away long ago, so here's some grainy footage I found on YouTube. Now, I remember being a little confused by the PAL borders during my very first viewing on that day. On Green Hill Zone, the borders were the same color as the water in the background, so that very first time, when Sonic, say, hit a spring for example, it almost looked like the water was rising up and swallowing the landscape, only for it to re-emerge as Sonic drops back down to the ground. It obviously wasn't what was happening, but that's how it looked to me as a kid who'd never witnessed this kind of crazy fast scrolling of the screen in all directions in a video game before. My pal ate up his 3 lives pretty quickly, and then it was my go. And from that very first push of right on the D-pad, I was hooked. I don't remember much of my playthrough, to be honest, beyond that I really enjoyed it. I don't know if it was actually the first time I pushed right. I mean, probably not. And I'd be surprised if my first attempt went much beyond Green Hill Zone Act 1. We played for another hour or so before I had to go home, but we never got beyond Green Hill, I remember that much. I don't even think we got to the first Robotnik appearance, but I distinctly remember there was something about the angry-looking Sonic sprite that really appealed to me. I really liked the character design from the moment I saw it. And so, by the time I had to leave, I'd seen enough. I was hooked. Sega's marketing department had targeted the design of this character with my demographic in mind, and, coupled with it being a really good game, they had smashed the assignment. I was obsessed. I went back home and told my parents all about what I'd seen. I'd gone from having a completely take-it-or-leave-it approach to gaming to a full-on obsession within the space of minutes. I'd go on to play Sonic 1 occasionally whenever I went over my friend's house for the rest of that year, but it would be 6 months before I would finally own it myself. This may sound like it would be a long time to a kid, but it actually wasn't too bad. It was 1991. It predated the Sonic comics, merchandise, TV shows and so on, so it was quite easy to put it to the back of my mind. But nevertheless, by the time Christmas rolled around, I was indescribably excited as I ripped the wrapping paper off a Mega Drive and Sonic the Hedgehog. I spent several hours of Christmas morning 1991 rolling around at the speed of sound before heading to my grandparents' house for a Christmas lunch. with my new Mega Drive in tow of course, where it would then be hooked up to a portable TV soon after we arrived. I remember I had to stop briefly for a Christmas lunch, which was absolute torture, so I scoffed down the meal as fast as I could.
Good.
Then got right back into it as soon as I was excused from the table. Then on December 26th, or Boxing Day,
if you're British,
our family had to go and visit our other grandparents' house for a couple of days. They lived a few hours away and obviously the Mega Drive came with me there too. I remember they only had a black and white portable TV, but I didn't care. It was good enough as long as I could keep bashing badniks. And this was where I had my first breakthrough. You see, I'd been stuck on the Green Hill Zone boss this whole time. And this was when I finally beat Robotnik for the very first time and got to Marble Zone. I was amazed.
There are different zones in this game?
I thought to myself. My dad saw it happen too. He was so impressed. He tried telling my mum about how I'd beaten Robotnik and how the look of the new level had changed and it had all different music now. I don't think she gave a honk, but it was nice that my dad was interested in it and my achievements. Let's talk about Robotnik for a moment, because from my earliest memories of him, I couldn't quite figure out what he was supposed to be. Like, in-game, it kind of looked like a man was flying a ship in the boss fights, but the mustache confused me because I couldn't tell what it was supposed to be. Then the full image of him on the box art further confused me. Was his nose a beak? Is he some kind of weird bird? Were these big fangs? Wait, does he have ice on his waist? What the hell is he? Have we got some kind of Krang thing going on here? Is he two people? I of course eventually figured it out.
That he was just a bloke.
But I'm curious, did anyone else have this confusion, or was I just a simple child? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, back to the game. From here on out, my memories of Sonic 1 get a little more hazy. As time progressed, I would eventually get to Spring Yard Zone. I remember my dad telling me around this time about his friend in work who had beaten the game, and told him how it was like a movie at the end, where all the names of the people who made it came up on screen. This sounded cool AF to me. I had to see it for myself, so this made me even more determined to beat the game. But there was a problem. Labyrinth Zone was a huge issue for me. Not the first couple of acts, I got through those just fine. My issue came with the boss fight. The one where you're chasing Robotnik up a narrow, trap-filled section of the stage with water rising and a high risk of drowning. You know, the one that if you mess it up, you get thrown back to a checkpoint right before the fight, with no rings in a difficulty spike bizarrely overlooked by the developers. Now, I kind of have a fear of deep water anyway.
IRL.
So this boss stressed me the F out. So much so that I wouldn't even attempt this fight after my first couple of goes. For whatever reason, it gave me such extreme anxiety that I'd just panic and hit the reset button involuntarily. And then I'd just start the game over, and then when I got to that point, boom, reset button. I'd do it again. To me, this boss was the end of the game, and there was no way I was ever going to attempt it again. It wasn't long before I learned the up, down, left, right, hold A, press start, level select code from someone at school, and this provided me with a much needed solution. When I got to Labyrinth Zone's boss, I'd hit reset, enter the code, and skip to Starlight Zone Act 1, avoiding the boss fight entirely. Screw you, Robotnik. I win. Kind of. It wasn't long after this that I'd eventually beat the game using this method. My only other issue was the last boss. I had to read a strategy in a magazine for the final zone, which basically involved keeping to the right-hand side of the screen as much as possible, and only attacking when the pistons came down on that side. Wait, were they pistons? What is a piston? That's what my friends and I called them, and it's stuck with me ever since, so there you go. Sonic 1 Final Zone. Pistons. Oh, let's check what they're called in the encyclopedia. Hang on. Hey, check this out. In this final single-act encounter, you have a split second to determine which giant piston of the Egg Crusher Dr. Eggman is hiding in. Hey, it is a piston. Anyway, this technique made the fight more of a slog, but it worked. And with that, I finally beat Sonic 1. Not with the Chaos Emeralds and the good ending, as you don't even get enough acts to collect all 6 Chaos Emeralds when you start from Starlight Zone on every playthrough. But hey, what can you do? That try again ending screen was good enough for me. The hell am I gonna do with 6 emeralds anyway? You keep them. Eventually, a few months passed and I took a shot at Labyrinth Zone's boss, and I beat him on my first go. I built up the courage to do this after learning you didn't actually have to hit him 8 times and smash up his eggmobile to finish the section. You just had to survive, make it out alive. So I eventually overcame the fear and was able to beat the game with all the Chaos Emeralds, which was a pretty easy feat. And it was then that I learned of the game's true ending, which was a nice surprise. Basically, the emeralds just make some nice flowers in the final cutscene, but it was still cool. It wouldn't be until the following Christmas, a year later, that I got my hands on Sonic 2. Before that happened though, I had 12 glorious months of beating Sonic the Hedgehog again and again and again, before moving on to the sequel. I squeezed every last drop of entertainment from the game, whether I was reading the instruction manual from cover to cover, well, the English section anyway, as I tried to take in every last bit of lore it had to offer, or whether I was studying the cover art and trying to draw the characters. I also like to use the game's debug mode cheat to create my own, I guess you'd call them, scenarios, as well as using it to try and break the game by loading as many sprites and other objects as I possibly could on screen to watch it all slow down and mess up. And that was my first ever experience with Sonic the Hedgehog, a game that wowed me so much when it launched that from the moment I saw it, I instantly became a fan of my favorite blue boy. I remember that first experience so clearly, and I have proudly been a member of the Sonic Fandom in the 32 years since, and counting. Over the years, so much of my leisure time has been spent with Sonic, whether it's been playing the games, watching the shows and movies, reading the comics and novels, or collecting the merch. Sonic was also what led me to move to Japan a few years ago, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made. So, thank you Sega and Sonic team. And it all started with Sonic 1. Of course, in my opinion, Sonic 1 was eventually surpassed by Sonic 2 and Sonic 3 and Knuckles in the following years, but I will always have a soft spot for that very first game. What an awesome start! Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button as it helps me out a lot. And if you're new here, consider subscribing for frequent high-quality evergreen Sonic and Sega videos. What was your first experience with Sonic the Hedgehog? Was it similar to mine? Did you ever struggle to understand what Robotnik was supposed to be? Did the Labyrinth Zone give you nightmares? Or perhaps your introduction to Sonic was something else entirely? Whatever it was, let me know in the comments below, as I love reading about it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.